My friends, the world we see is not the whole world. Behind every whisper of temptation and every quiet victory of conscience, a greater war is being waged. Hell's legions do not tremble before noise, rituals, or religious bravado. They tremble before a single soul aflame with the living God. You see, God's fire is not a mere emotional warmth. It is a holy blaze that purifies rather than pampers. It consumes deceit, it devours pride, and it lights up truth with an unbearable brightness. Demons are not frightened by how loudly you pray. They are terrified when your prayers start changing you. The tragedy of modern thinking is not that it disbelieves too much, but that it disbelieves the wrong things. We are surrounded by a culture that laughs at the notion of a spiritual world, as if darkness were only poetry and evil merely psychology. Yet the scriptures, the saints, and even our own restless consciences tell a different story. They whisper that we are not spectators in a moral drama, but soldiers stationed in a world that has forgotten it is at war. The unseen realm is not a myth. It is more real than the walls that surround you, for it is the atmosphere in which every decision, temptation, and act of faith occurs. There are invisible hands that reach to twist the mind toward despair, and unseen eyes that watch for the moment you forget who you belong to. The battle is not fought with swords or slogans, but with obedience, purity, and prayer. The enemy does not fear noise. He fears holiness. You will not always sense the conflict. It hides behind ordinary days, behind irritation and boredom, behind the quiet temptation to give up what is good for what is easy. The demonic is seldom theatrical. It is subtle, persuasive, dressed in comfort and common sense. Its chief weapon is forgetfulness, the dulling of the soul until the eternal seems irrelevant. And yet light also moves unseen. The presence of God does not announce itself with thunder every morning, but it endures like the steady flame of a candle that refuses to go out, however fierce the wind. Angels walk unseen in places where believers keep their integrity. Every small act of faithfulness, every temptation resisted, every truth spoken when silence would be safer, is a strike against the kingdom of shadows. To carry God's fire, then, is to live with this awareness. It is to walk through the visible world with eyes fixed upon the invisible one. The world may call such vision delusion, but heaven calls it sanity. The one who knows there is a war refuses to sleep through it. Every moment becomes a choice, to add kindling to the divine fire within, or to let the embers fade under the cold breath of disbelief. There is a kind of fire that does not consume but refines. It is not the blaze of passion that flares for a moment and dies, nor the flicker of enthusiasm that depends upon applause. The holy fire of God is a steady, sanctifying presence, a flame that purifies the soul rather than entertains it. It burns not to destroy the self, but to deliver it from everything false, shallow, and self-serving. Those who carry this fire are not loud, but luminous. They do not draw attention to themselves, for the light they bear does not belong to them. The mark of holy fire is transformation. It changes appetite before it changes circumstance. What once delighted the flesh becomes distasteful. What once felt tedious prayer, service, humility, becomes the soul's necessity. It is a strange alchemy of grace, turning the heart inside out until obedience is no longer a burden but a joy. This is not the frenzy of religious performance, but the slow, bright work of holiness. The flame burns steadily, consuming pride, vanity, and pretense, until the person within begins to reflect the one who kindled it. Such a person cannot live comfortably in the shadows. The fire makes duplicity unbearable. It exposes secret motives and demands sincerity where the world tolerates masks. The burning heart becomes a mirror, revealing truth even when truth offends. Yet this exposure is not cruel, it is merciful. It is the kindness of a surgeon's knife, removing what would otherwise corrupt the whole body. The holy fire wounds only to heal, scorches only to cleanse. And this fire does more than purify, it attracts and repels. The humble are drawn to its warmth, but the powers of darkness recoil from its heat. Demons are not terrified by words about God, but by the evidence of his presence in a life set ablaze. The one who carries holy fire walks as a contradiction to the world's cold logic. Gentle but unyielding, lowly yet radiant, peaceful yet dangerous to hell. Such a soul becomes a living altar, a place where heaven's purity meets earth's corruption. Wherever they go, the air seems thinner, the lies weaker, the shadows less certain of their power. There comes a moment in every soul touched by divine fire, when compromise becomes impossible. It is not that the person becomes self-righteous or intolerant of others. Rather, they find within themselves a growing inability to coexist with deceit, corruption, or moral apathy. The heart that carries God's flame becomes restless in the presence of darkness. What once amused now grieves, what once tempted now repels, and what once seemed harmless now appears poisonous. This is not a product of moral superiority, it is the evidence of transformation. The fire within begins to illuminate not only the world's shadows but the subtle corners of one's own heart. Darkness in this sense is not limited to the grand evils of history. It often hides in small concessions, whispered lies, and comfortable silences. The enemy delights in half-light, in lives that are bright enough to appear righteous yet dim enough to harbor compromise. But the soul aflame with God's holiness cannot remain in twilight. It longs for clarity, for the full brightness of truth, however painful it may be. Such a person may find themselves misunderstood, even rejected, because their very presence exposes what others would rather ignore. Light does not need to accuse, it merely shines, and in shining it reveals. This intolerance for darkness does not manifest as condemnation of others, but as mourning. The heart aflame weeps over the world's blindness. It prays for the sinner instead of scorning him, knowing that the same fire which purifies could, without grace, have consumed them too. Yet, even in compassion, it refuses to make peace with sin. It cannot laugh at what crucified love, nor celebrate what wounds the soul. The conscience, once dull, now beats like a living nerve, quick to feel the slightest touch of corruption. To such a heart, holiness becomes oxygen and deceit a suffocating fog. The world may call this sensitivity excessive, but heaven calls it health. For when light truly dwells within, darkness becomes intolerable not by command but by nature. The fire of God has changed the chemistry of the soul. It burns for purity as instinctively as lungs draw breath, and in that burning, it declares war on every shadow that seeks to reclaim the human heart. There is a love that does not begin in human emotion but in divine flame. It is the love that flows from a heart so purified by God's fire that hatred finds no lodging within it. This love is not soft or sentimental, it is fierce, costly, and unexplainable. It burns with a light that terrifies darkness, for it loves even when every natural impulse screams to retaliate. The one who carries such love does not merely avoid revenge. They bless those who curse them, pray for those who persecute them, and weep for those who wound them. Hell cannot comprehend this kind of affection, for it violates the logic of bitterness that governs its kingdom. Hatred feeds on wounds, but divine love feeds on the will of God. It forgives because it must, not because it is convenient. It remembers injury not to nurse it, but to redeem it. Such love does not excuse evil, but it refuses to mirror it. It stands in quiet defiance of vengeance, declaring that mercy is stronger than wrath. In the realm of spirits, this kind of love is a weapon more potent than any curse, breaking prayer, because it dismantles the very structure of hatred itself. Demons thrive on division, on grudges, on simmering resentment. When they encounter a soul that loves through pain, their strategies collapse like ash before the wind. This fire-born love is not naive. It sees evil clearly, yet still chooses to act from compassion rather than contempt. It does not mean trusting the untrustworthy or pretending harm is harmless. It means refusing to surrender the heart to bitterness. To love under such conditions is to stand beside Christ himself, who loved his executioners even as they mocked him. Such love is not weakness. It is divine strength disguised as gentleness. Wherever this love appears, the atmosphere changes. It exposes hypocrisy without words, melts hostility without argument, and brings warmth to places long frozen by fear. It spreads quietly, often unnoticed, until it ignites others with the same unquenchable flame. The world calls this foolish. Hell calls it dangerous. For when a human heart loves beyond its own capacity, the presence of God is unmistakable, and the kingdom of darkness finds itself powerless before such light. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to give fear the final word. The one who carries God's fire does not walk through life untouched by trembling indeed. They may feel fear more sharply than others, for their eyes are open to the true weight of the battle. Yet in the heart purified by divine flame, fear becomes the servant of faith, not its master. Courage born of the Spirit is not reckless bravado or human stubbornness. It is the quiet decision to trust God when every sense insists he has vanished. It is the steadfast soul whispering, "Still I will stand," while the storm howls around it. Fear is the oldest language of the fallen world. It speaks through doubt, through anxiety, through the subtle dread that God might not keep his word. It is the whisper that turns faith into calculation, obedience into hesitation, and prayer into mere ritual. The demonic kingdom feeds on this language. It thrives wherever believers forget the authority of the one who lives within them. Fear is not merely an emotion, it is a persuasion, a shadow that argues against divine reality. But courage, true courage, speaks a different tongue. It looks upon the same darkness and says, "You are not ultimate." It trembles, but it does not retreat. The brave soul does not always roar. Often, it simply refuses to run. It may be found in the mother who prays over a sick child when hope seems gone, or the believer who confesses truth before a hostile crowd, or the quiet saint who forgives what others call unforgivable. Demons understand fear. They manipulate it, magnify it, build empires upon it. But they cannot interpret courage. Courage confuses them, because it proceeds not from confidence in self, but from communion with God. The courageous believer walks as one already conquered and resurrected. Death itself has lost its bargaining power. This courage is not learned in moments of triumph, but forged in the furnaces of uncertainty. It grows where comfort dies. The person aflame with God's fire is not immune to fear. They simply carry within them a greater heat that melts its chains. Courage in this sense is faith under pressure, obedience under threat, hope under siege. It is the heart that continues to sing in prison, the voice that blesses while bleeding, the step that moves forward while sight has failed. Such faith does not deny fear's presence, it declares fear's power void. In a world ruled by self-preservation, courage appears as madness. It chooses truth over safety, righteousness over reputation, eternity over applause. The man or woman filled with divine fire will often stand alone, yet they are never abandoned. Heaven leans close to such souls. When they speak, their words carry the weight of conviction forged in the fires of testing. When they act, their movements echo with the authority of one who fears God more than man. Hell trembles before such people, for every act of courage disrupts its economy of fear. To stand unshaken before darkness is not to deny danger. It is to know a deeper safety. It is to remember that no shadow can swallow the light that burns within. Every step taken in faith sends tremors through the unseen world. Every moment of courage becomes a declaration that God is near, even when unseen. The soldier of light does not need assurance of victory to act. They act because victory is already written. The world may call this defiance, but heaven calls it worship. And the legions of darkness recognize in such courage the unmistakable scent of divine fire. Truth and joy are the twin pillars upon which the kingdom of God rests in the soul. One burns, the other sings. Truth is the sword, joy is the song that follows its swing. Where truth stands, deceit cannot endure. Where joy reigns, despair loses its voice. Together they make a fortress that no demon can penetrate. The one who carries God's fire is marked by both, an unbending commitment to truth and a joy that survives the ruin of comfort. These two qualities are not natural dispositions, but supernatural evidences of divine life. They do not come cheaply, nor do they come separately. Truth, by its nature, divides light from shadow. It is never neutral. It exposes, it clarifies, it wounds in order to heal. The one who bears God's fire feels this weight deeply. Truth demands loyalty when lies offer convenience. It calls for honesty when silence would protect reputation. To walk in truth is to refuse the camouflage of hypocrisy, to be the same in secret as in public. Such a soul cannot play at religion, cannot twist scripture to justify comfort, cannot bend conviction to please the crowd. Their allegiance is not to opinion, but to reality, God's reality, which does not bow to cultural wind or personal whim. Demons are terrified of truth, for their power rests upon deception. They whisper to the believer that truth is relative, that sincerity is enough, that love without clarity is virtue. Yet the fire-born spirit knows better. Love divorced from truth is sentimentality, and truth without love is cruelty. The holy flame binds them together. The one who carries God's fire speaks truth gently but firmly, aware that every falsehood surrendered to keeps the world in bondage. They understand that truth is not merely a statement, it is a person. To betray truth is to betray Christ himself. Therefore, even when truth isolates, they do not yield. The cost of truth is high, but the cost of compromise is ruin. And yet, while truth steadies the spine, joy strengthens the heart. Joy is the echo of eternity in a mortal frame. It is not the shallow happiness of circumstance, but the deep vibration of a soul aligned with heaven. Unshakable joy is not dependent on ease, it flourishes in affliction. It is the laughter of faith that has seen through despair's disguise. The one who carries God's fire does not deny suffering, they simply refuse to let it define them. Their joy is not denial but defiance, a declaration that pain will not have the final word. Such joy confounds both the world and the infernal realm. The world cannot understand how a saint sings in chains, or how a believer smiles through tears. Hell cannot replicate joy, for joy is born of hope, and the demonic knows only fear. A joyful believer is a paradox in a culture addicted to grievance and dread. They may grieve, but their grief never becomes despair. They may fall, but they rise singing. Their laughter in the valley becomes a weapon sharper than steel. It reminds the enemy that his threats are hollow and his defeat inevitable. This joy does not ignore reality, it interprets it through resurrection. It looks upon the cross and sees not tragedy but triumph. It looks upon suffering and senses the nearness of glory. It knows that every tear is temporary, every night finite, every shadow destined to break before dawn. Such a perspective cannot be taught in theory. It is forged in communion with God. The one who carries unshakable joy has walked through fire and found that even flames can become light when seen through the eyes of faith. When uncompromising truth and unshakable joy dwell together, a soul becomes ungovernable by darkness. Lies find no entrance, despair finds no seat. This person's presence disturbs the comfort of hypocrisy and shatters the silence of fear. They carry the fragrance of heaven into every room, not through preaching alone, but through the undeniable integrity of their life. They may lose much, approval, safety, possessions, but they lose nothing essential, for their treasure is not stored on trembling ground. The truth they live by exposes deceit without bitterness, and the joy they carry disarms sorrow without denial. The world is weary of sermons without evidence. Such a life is the sermon. Every step, every smile, every word of honesty becomes a spark that spreads the divine fire further. For in the union of truth and joy, God is made visible, bright, unyielding, and infinitely kind. And in that radiance the powers of darkness know they have already lost. The fire of God is not a symbol, it is a reality that reshapes everything it touches. Those who carry it are not marked by titles or applause, but by transformation. Their presence unsettles darkness not because of who they are, but because of who burns within them. In them truth stands fearless, love flows unconditionally, courage walks unshaken, and joy refuses to die. They are living torches in a world that has grown used to twilight. To carry God's fire is not to escape the battle, it is to illuminate it. You will feel the weight of opposition, the sting of misunderstanding, the loneliness of obedience. But in that furnace, the divine flame only grows purer, brighter, steadier. The very forces that seek to extinguish it become the fuel that makes it blaze higher. The demons do not tremble before mere religion. They tremble before the saint who has become a living altar, one whose heart is wholly surrendered, whose soul is lit by the holiness of heaven. Such a person needs no stage, no audience, no crown. The fire itself testifies. It consumes hypocrisy, defies fear, and radiates love that cannot be imitated. And so, my friends, the question is not whether you attend the light, but whether the light attends you. Has the fire of God taken residence within your heart? Does your presence disturb the darkness or blend comfortably with it? For in the end, only one thing matters, that the flame which once fell from heaven still finds wood willing to burn upon the earth.